Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today on the website of Paris Oise auctioneers based in France, we're going to have a look at their latest auction, which is a mixture of musical instruments and other bits. Of course, we're only going to have a look at the musical instruments section of this, which is a fair amount of lots, or maybe 50 or so. Some interesting bits, I think. This particular auction is finishing on April the 28th. It is the 23rd today, so quite a few days left to go. I'll put a link to the catalogue in the description. Just to say, this is a French auction, so bear that in mind if you are bidding and you are outside of France. Think about import, export fees, CITES restrictions, all of that fun stuff if shipping abroad. Just before we get started, just like to say, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing, like, comment, turn on notifications, all of that fun stuff, because it really does help quite a lot and I'd be very grateful for any support. So yeah, let's just start. So the first lot of musical instruments seems to be a violin. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. Unsurprisingly, it's a French violin, Mircore, of course. We expect nothing less from the French auctions. So it's got a label for Nicolas Lupo. But let's see, we can of course increase the size of the pictures a bit here. So 35.8 length the back there. Let's see if we can make this a bit bigger and a bit clearer. If we have a look at these pictures here, not necessarily the clearest of pictures in general, unfortunately, but a Mircore violin of some kind, not representational of the label there, has some worm and stuff like that. Sound post crack there, breaking the core, I believe that's what they mean. 400 to 600 euros on that in any case. So let's move on. Another Mircore violin here. It's a Breton, it seems to say. So this is going to be fairly standard here, nothing too crazy. It's got a broken button there, so that'll be a bit of repair. Very standard instrument, that one. Right, our next lot here, I'm going to constantly have this box coming up, I think. Early 20th century violin with a Leon Bernadel label in that. 33.4 length the back, so 3/4 size violin, it seems. Let's have a look at this anyway in a bit more detail just to see. Looks fairly standard, but not too bad for a 3/4 instrument. On to lot 39, Mircore violin again, Marquis de l'Air. We see these quite a lot, very common French trade violin, and it's nothing super exciting, unfortunately. Now we've got another 20th century violin with a Paul Bouchat label there. Let's have a look at this. So far we're seeing a lot of kind of very generic French stuff. Let's hope we might see something a bit more interesting. Violin, late 18th, early 19th century. Okay, it's got a Steiner label here. Length 35.2 length the back, interesting. Length the back, that's kind of what we do see on some older instruments and some Tallinn instruments, of course contemporary as well, so it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it is interesting. Although the violin as a whole just doesn't look super interesting as such from these pictures, but these are not the greatest pictures, to be honest. So 500 to 800 euros on that. Difficult to see what's going on. Right, violin with a Genuaris Giuliano label, interesting. Let's have a look at this one, a bit bigger, 35.9 length back, retouched varnish. A break on the table. This looks fairly standard. I don't think this is anything of any particular interest. Kind of nice enough scroll though. It's quite a nice scroll actually. 3 to 400 on that. We've got some kind of bow here. Pernambuco bow, signed Lemaire. 5 to 600 on that. Violin with the label Joseph Jan Juna, handcrafted in Stuna, Czech Republic. Okay, so it's probably very standard trade instrument there. Then we have 3/4 Mircore violin there. Fairly standard. Could be actually the other violin that we looked at before, the 34. That maybe that's a bit more coming onto a 7/8 size and a 3/4 potentially. Right, 45 violin case with a label of Joe Baptista Cerruti there. 36 length of back. Let's have a look at this. Fairly nice back, but looks fairly standard. Once again, fairly nice scroll. I'm not sure why they have the pictures at that angle. That's a bit weird. 1800 to 2,500. That seems potentially a bit pricey there. Got a bow here. Picat school bow. That seems to make sense. 5 to 700. Pretty expensive, I would say. Another instrument here. Children's violin. This seems probably a Chinese violin. Here is a Romanian violin there. Suzuki. So Japanese. This is all fairly low tier, so nothing super exciting so far, sadly. 20th century violin. Let's get nothing too crazy there. 3/4 20th century. And children's violin there. Another one that's probably Chinese. Okay, getting a bit more interesting now. Very beautiful 18th century violin without label. Okay. Interesting. 2 to 5,000 on that. Let's have a look at this a bit more closely. Yeah, it's kind of fairly nice back, but looks like it's had some funny things done to the button. I'm not sure if there's some cracks there as well. It's in a pretty poor state looking at that, so it needs a lot of work. I think that's a bit an optimistic estimate there. Right, we've got a cello, late 19th century. Damage, yeah, that's some pretty serious damage, I'd say. 250 to 400, but that's not an unreasonable estimate. That's a fair amount. Interesting kind of crackle on the varnish there. There's some odd picture angles. Yeah, shame about that. It could probably have been fairly nice, or can be after some repair. Thomasat cello bow, they're saying here, 700 to 800 euros. And we've got cello bow stamped Louis Bazar here, 800 to 1,000 on that. Another children's violin, so probably Chinese. 19th century violin there, iron mark for Nicholas Ain, and it looks like that kind of model type there. Comes with a bow as well. Yeah, it looks like that kind of classic French violin of that ilk. 5 to 600 euros, I think that's fair enough. 36.3, it's fairly long, but could be worse. Right, violin with an Amati Maginot label there. Let's have a look at this, 6 to 700. Looks like that's had some serious varnish issues there in the back. Looks like it's coming undone as well, or been glued back badly. Violin with a label for Alexandre Delanoy, Bordeaux, 1300 to 1500 on that one. Definitely some interesting pictures. Yeah, quite nice scroll. Another bow here, silver mounted bow with the brand Sylvestre and Moccatel there, 800 to 1000. Actually looks fairly nice. Odd that they don't have a close-up of the head. It's a bit strange. Violin Miracle there with a Bertucci label. Just your standard kind of stuff there. Okay, violin bearing a label Bernadelle. Okay, 6,000 to 7,000, so they're fairly confident about this one of being some kind of decent instrument. Yeah, quite nice back. You can see the varnish is quite interesting there. These pictures are really not that great, unfortunately, but yeah, it looks like quite a nice French instrument of some kind. 6 to 7 on that. There might be interest in that, I would think. Leveste bow, 5 to 600 on that. Okay, another Chinese violin there, children's violin. There's quite a lot of those. Okay, violin. Oh no, this is a viola, isn't it? Is it? Yeah, viola. Here, the violin alto. We've somehow lost the translation here. It's got a Martin Margenot mark there, 395 length of back, so not super massive, nothing super exciting either. 6 to 800 Malines bow, 6 to 800 on that. And a violin with a label for Giuseppe Scarampella, 1882, 4 to 6 on that one as well, so they have some kind of interest in this one as well. Yeah, fairly interesting looking violin. And moving on, another bow here, Louis Bazin. They are saying here 5 to 700. And another child's violin from China. Okay, another violin, Pierre Hell Luthier. Here, let's have a look at the pictures. 1500 to 2000 on this one. Not quite so nice as some of the other instruments we've seen. Okay, violin, Miracle violin with a Scarampella label again. 1200 to 1500 on this one. Let's have a look at that. I don't mind that actually. It's quite nice. They could have put the bridge on for the picture. Yeah, some interesting wear there. It's a bit odd. Ooh, we've lost a picture there. Yeah, not 100% sure what to make of that. Length of back 35.5, so that's not too bad. Got another bow, a Pernambuco violin bow with a Guyard stamp there, 5 to 700. German violin with a Degani label, 800 to 1000 on that. Looks fairly standard. Another Peugeot school bow this time. Quite nice. Interesting wood on that. 5 to 700 on that. And another violin here. Violin, another Pierre Hell labelled violin. 2 to 2,500 on this one. Looks a lot nicer, I think, than the other one there. So that might also see some interest. Another Chinese violin here. Oh, we've got a guitar here, a Gomez classical guitar, nothing too crazy, 60 to 80. We've got a Gibson bass guitar there from the 1960s, 2 to 2.5 on that. So we're looking at a few things away from violins now. Seems fairly reasonable for the age. Not a lot of information though about it. Fender Stratocaster from the 1970s. So interesting. 1800 to 2200 also seems fairly reasonable. So kind of big 70s kind of headstock, I think, if I'm right. Right, we've got an Epiphone jazz guitar, Broadway model, which looks to be more of a contemporary one rather than the older ones. 3 to 400 on that. Fernandez guitar there, Monterey model, 3 to 400. And another Strat here, Corona, California. This again doesn't look too old, that one, 6 to 700. Oh, we're back to instruments again. We've got a Mircore violin there, Medifino. This is the budget, around 100 to 150 on that. Okay, double bass bow there, signed Malene, 3 to 500 on that. Needs a bit of TLC. Another violin here. Violin by Natale Novelli, made in Milan, 1940. Okay, 600 to 700. Okay, interesting. That seems to be quite a low estimate, if correct. Very kind of difficult to judge anything from those pictures, unfortunately. 35.5 length of back. Violin labelled Georges Cuneau. Let's have a quick look at this. 1200 to 2,500 there. Okay. Got another bow here, silver mounted bow there by Malene. Presume that's a violin bow there, 1500 to 1800. Got another Chinese children's violin there. And that is it. That's an interesting statue. I think that's the end of the musical instruments there. So yeah, that is it. That's the Paris Oise auction of musical instruments. A few kind of curious things, not really as exciting as I thought it would be, to be honest, unfortunately, but there we go. We've got to give it a go, so I'll put a link in the description as always. Definitely a few things worth checking out, maybe a couple of the bows and a few of the instruments. Pictures not the greatest, but you know, it's could be worse for sure. So yeah, check it out, see what you think. So thanks a lot for watching, really appreciate it, and I will catch you next time. Bye.